Welcome back, everybody, to the BannermanTech podcast, episode 3. And today I have a very special guest who I'm excited for you all to meet, Arveen Kohli, CEO and founder of 11th Dimension Services. Arveen, rather than me butchering an introduction, do you mind telling us a little bit about your background and giving us kind of your standard customer intro?
Yeah, I just wouldn't know where to stop. No, I'm just kidding. Corey, thank you. And very nice to meet all the audience. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be on your podcast. I'm very excited about having this conversation. Yes, 11th Dimension Services was born about a year ago. We're just over a year old. So yay, we made it through the first year. I have professionally been very fortunate to spend my career and pace it through very many amazing organizations, starting with Accenture. Then I went in sort of on my own for a little while and call it being an entrepreneur and started more of a legal consultative effort. And right after that, had the opportunity to work with Microsoft. And then that journey took me on to working for Dell Technologies, where I had the opportunity to work with Fortune 25, Fortune 50, and then transitioned over to the federal side of the business. And it's been quite an incredible journey because it's been full of wonderful people, relationships, and I think all of that together was a huge motivation to help me, in the inception of this idea called 11th Dimension Services. So here we are.
I love it. So, and one thing I noticed about your history, and I know about you that's interesting, is you went from that kind of legal side and strategy over to the tech side, and I think that how would you say that helped your career going forward?
Yeah, that's a really good question. They say education is one thing that never goes wasted. I'm the perfect example of that. When I did my undergrad, I know a lot of people had heartache because I was a topper in science, and my parents naturally wanted me to go into med school. And I wanted to destroy the Indian tradition of being a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer. So I was like, defy gravity. I am going to do that. So I was certain that I didn't want to be either one of those three professions, and I was successful. I did my undergrad in psychology and foods and nutrition because I thought, there's more ways to giving to the world if you're good in science than just being a doctor.
Yeah, there is.
And so I did that. And then my parents moved here to the US, and it was the year of the Y2K. And so naturally, everybody said, you know what you should be doing? Computer science. And I thought, interesting. So I started doing computer science, and it took me probably 5 days to realize I hate technology and I hate doing computer science, which I still don't, I wouldn't call myself a geeky mindset. I'm not
you're a technologist or,
I don't gel well with that term. So I did technology and then for a little bit, and then thankfully I met my spouse, who is the biggest encouragement of my life. And he said, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to go to law school because I think I really like to solve problems for people. And being a lawyer would allow me to do that. Little did I know that I took myself from behind a screen to behind a book. I passionately thought I'd gone in the wrong direction. But again, education is never a waste. And so a company as incredible as Accenture is, found a way to utilize my my crazies or my insane urge to do a lot, I guess, and find the perfect blend of where to utilize my skills. So I sat right at the intersection of where legal meets technology meets strategy, and worked with the board of directors of Accenture. And then that trajectory just took off on its own.
No kidding. That's, for anybody who's watching who isn't in the technology industry, Accenture is pretty ubiquitous, huge company, massive just massive reputation. To be at that level is pretty interesting. And if you don't mind me asking, so you've mentioned something in the story about their chief executives that you've worked with over the years. You were there at an interesting time of transition, right? And got to meet some of their big people. I don't know how deep you want to go into that, but it was just interesting hearing about it. I think our listeners would be interested in your time at Accenture. Whatever
Yes,
you can share.
absolutely. So when I was at Accenture, it was the era of Mr. Bill Green. He was a CEO, very incredible person, very personable human being. And then that was the time that, as part of the succession planning, Julie Sweet was brought on board, another absolutely amazing human being. And she is, again, very personable, very nice to talk to. Alongside Julie came Joe Ernich, who's the general counsel now. Julie came in as the general counsel at that point. And then I left Accenture when Bill Green stepped down, and Pierre, God bless his soul, was brought on board as the next CEO. And when, unfortunately, too early in life, he passed away, Julie was announced as the next CEO, as it should have been, I guess. So yes, I was part of that initial journey. Yeah. It's very nice to see how the years tell us how many years have gone by, the current times. And I look at it and like, yeah, Julie Sweet is the CEO. And, it's been so many years ago that I had the pleasure of, crossing paths with that institution. But I will tell you, you learn something everywhere. And I learned a few things at Accenture. I say my bloodstream is Accenturized forever because they taught me a few things, and it's not just about Accenture being Accenture. I think you learn more from the people. You're sometimes humbled by working with people who are at the highest in their careers and are very much looked upon in good graces of how they've made their path through their life to be so successful. But you also realize how humble they are. And I think that's the part I learned at Accenture. I always tell people there's one thing, a quote that sticks with me and will always do. When you enter a room, park your ego at the door.
Especially any time in business, any kind of business too.
In life, I would say, anytime personally or professionally, your ego at the door, because people will love you a little bit more.
Yep. And you'll be a little bit more successful in all of life doing it that way, I think. So that's awesome. So tell me about the time from Accenture over to Microsoft. I know you did some consulting work there in the middle. Let's actually pause there for a second, because you did some consulting work then, and I think you've done some consulting work since, right? How long has that been a passion for you and something you like to do? And I'd love to hear about that a little bit.
Yeah, Corey, something people don't know about me, which can be a little surprise, is I was an entrepreneur when I was 17. That was the first time I had tasted the flavor of being an entrepreneur. Didn't even know, probably. I was too naive to understand what it meant in the grand scheme of things. I came from a business family. And when I was 17, up until the age when I was 17, I was born with a golden spoon in my mouth, and everything was as good as it could be financially. And just when you touch 17 and you're like, I know how to use this wealth, we didn't have any. So we went from riches to rags. And in an effort to sustain and help my family financially, I have a creative side to me. So I like to do pottery, but not just any pottery. I like man-sized pottery, and then designing that pottery to fill in some unique places, such as 5-star hotels, some galleries. So doing that, and I started making man-sized teddy bears and toys, and it was a big fad at that time. And 17, it all sounds really good too. So I had a business called Roshi's Pets, and And Roshi Spets did pottery, and it also did soft toys. And so that was the first time I was an entrepreneur. So it was not a surprise that I have come back to it, again and again and again in my career. So after Accenture, I popped my head out of the water and I thought, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I said, I want to be my own boss and help do things in the world that maybe I don't hear about very often. So I started being a consultative entrepreneur that offered legal IT kind of services. Worked with Sara Lee, worked with Redbox, worked with Northern Trust, some of the Chicago, incorporated firms. And it was a joy. It was very flexible. It was very nice. It gave room to my creativity. And I absolutely loved it until one day I got a call from Microsoft and they said they're hiring backwards, which I still don't understand what it means, but it means something. So basically, it meant that I'd never applied to Microsoft, but they found me and then they invited me into their office and hired me as an athlete. And the rest is history. And athlete is basically they didn't have a role for you. They just for a role for yourself in the first month or so and warm up to whatever you think is a good place because they think you can serve in a few different capacities in the organization. So that was my journey with Microsoft. But yes, it is no surprise that I knew that the last act of my career would be an entrepreneur because look, here we are with 11th Dimension.
Yeah. Well, and I think people underestimate, like when you're born into a family who has business experience, it seems normal to put yourself out there and own everything and work late and do the numbers, right, and balance the checkbook for the business and everything, and all of those things that people take for granted. And then you have families who nobody's ever owned a business and they've all been workers for others. And I feel bad sometimes for folks who haven't been exposed. I was exposed to both, a lot of workers in my family and then a lot of business owners, mostly in blue collar though. So like I can imagine what it was like though, going, having tough times and having to go take off at 17. That's fun. I mean, it's not fun for anybody when you hit adulthood and go, what am I gonna do with my time and my life, right? But I'm glad you found something you love, and I think the consulting thing ties right into that too. It shows that like that was like you've always had a pull that way. So we had Microsoft for a number of years, and I know you did some great things there, but I think one of the ones that's super germane to your current experience is moving into the federal sides. Tell me about how that shift happened. You were running a pretty big book of business on the commercial side for Dell, and then moved over to the federal services side, right?
Correct. And I have a story for everything. So there's a story for this one.
Good. That's what this is for.
Okay. So again, not common information. I said I belonged to a business family. So in India. And my grandfather, at the time of partition, when India and Pakistan separated into two separate countries, my grandfather and my grandmother, who had my dad in her womb, she was 7.5 months pregnant. They walked from the other side, so from Pakistan into India, because any non-Muslim had to come into India. Yep. And they came to the center point of India, a place called Nagpur. And they started, a couple of years later, my grandfather started a federal consulting, or not consulting, a federal services company where they would offer perishables to the federal government. So they provided all things perishable, from milk to fruits to meats, to the federal government, Army, Navy, Air Force, everybody. And as a successor, my dad took on that business and then grew it tenfolds, and also started a plastics industry, all the plastic footwear we see these days. That was a business he started when I was a little kid. So I came from that family background of providing services to the federal government. I was born and raised in a federal cantonment because our bungalow, our home, a British style bungalow with 4 acres of land around, sounds quite unreal right now because I grew up very much as a country girl and would wake up very early in the morning because we had an army practice area in front of our house. So at 4 a.m., they would be there to practice.
Oh,
And it
yeah.
would, it was the thing that my grandfather taught me, that if you want to be somebody successful, you have to be up early in the morning. So that still sticks with me today. And so it's no surprise that I've found my place in the world to be in the federal business because there's an emotional reason for it. I was born in a house that had 3 girls. So my father and my mother, I'm the oldest of 3 daughters. And the younger one to me is 7 years younger. And then I have my youngest sister who's 12 years younger. And I vividly remember, much like a lot of parts of the world, a boy child is considered some sort of an iconic privilege or a feather added to your cap, was the same thing in India. And thankfully not in our house, because my grandparents or my parents never made us feel like we were any less, but in fact more than anybody else. They boosted confidence into us, all 3 girls. But then when we would go out to social events, I'd sometimes see somebody ask my parents, "Oh, how many kids do you have?" It's a natural question people ask. And my parents would be like, "We have 3 girls." And they'd look at my parents in front of us, no kidding, and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry."
Oh, Lord.
And, and I swear to God, I would immediately, as a 7-year-old, still remember looking up at my parents' faces and seeing if they were feeling bad. And thankfully, I never saw that emotion on their face. And a lot of times I would hear my dad saying, "Oh, no, I'm actually blessed with 3 girls." So somewhere deep down in my heart, there was a desire to make sure that I do become the boy child, somebody who is going to carry on the family history of providing, being a business person, providing services to the federal government. So to me, in my heart, it doesn't come out as a surprise at all that this is what I'm doing today, because there's a story behind it. It was simmering on the burner for too long.
Well, and that's kind of that's such a funny story about the kids thing, because I'm in a situation. I have 2 young sons, and we're praying for a girl. Like, don't get me wrong, like I had that thought too when the first son was coming. I was like, oh well, we got that out of the way. So, but now I got 2, and I'm like, man, if I end up with 3 or 4 boys trying to get a daughter, I'm gonna be really bummed out. So, I think everybody, but yeah, I've never understood that. I think sometimes when people are on the outside, they assume those things because of cultural things, but I've never met a dad who wasn't proud of whatever children he had in whatever form. And it's always the oldest too. I'm the oldest too, and there's something about being the oldest where you were just driven to do something. And
you carry of the world on your shoulders for sure.
So on that country land, did you get to take advantage of any of that land? Did you guys have animals, or like what was your thing as a kid before you started getting into more of the school and work stuff? Like what was your kind of pastimes?
No, even when I was in school, I was always a very confident, outspoken. I would say I was very well behaved, but I was mischievous. I do a thing or two every now and then that would get me into trouble. I like motorbikes, and so this one time my dad's office was outside our home, and so I saw there was somebody who came in on a very good-looking bike, and he left the keys, unfortunately, on the bike. So so I had the perfect opportunity, and I disappeared, and I somehow made myself get hurt, and came back.
Every time.
And I thought, okay, now you got to disappear because you're going to have the whole family investigate this. So we had 3 large mango trees outside in our backyard. And every time I did something wrong, I knew to go and hide into one of those. And there was something to feed me because I would have mangoes there. So
sit there and eat something sweet and wait for the punishment.
Yes, but
awesome.
Talking about animals, I actually established the one phobia in my life was born as part of my childhood. because I told you we lived in a place called Nagpur.
Yeah.
And if you translate that in plain English, it means Nag is cobra, Pur
Mm.
is land, cobra land.
Oh, wow. Wonderful.
Yes. So I do have a phobia. I cannot go to the reptile section in any zoo. I cannot look at a snake on a TV screen. I
Oh,
cannot
man.
look at a snake in a book. I don't want to see snakes or anything that looks like them remotely, because I saw so many of them growing up and in such weird places, like walking into your bathroom in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and you see one hanging from the other door in the bathroom, and it's just like, ugh, there's
Keep in
snakes.
mind, folks, too, she's living in like a nice place. Like they got it great. And you still there's parts of the world, man, where certain animals, it doesn't matter what you
Doesn't
do,
matter.
you're
Kind of
gonna
weird.
run into them.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
bungalow. It was a British style bungalow from, years ago. And so it had that roof, the red roof, and there's a hollow in between, and snakes would find a way to get in there
Yeah.
because
They
snake.
climb.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate snakes. Let's move on from snakes because I don't like I don't have a full phobia, but I don't like them either. And I live in Georgia, so it's like it's something I think about.
I live in Texas.
Yeah, yeah, I know. So, and that's you guys get but okay, so that's awesome, and thanks for sharing that. That gives me a really good view in, and I saw that you finished your undergrad in India, right?
Yes, I completed
And
my undergrad in India. Yeah.
did you move after undergrad, or did you do your post secondary and everything, and law was all here?
No, yes. I moved right at the brink of, as soon as I completed my undergrad, my parents, because we were not doing well financially. My dad had come to the US the year before, and he was offered a position on H-1B, but he's an emotional father of three girls, and he decided, I'm not going to leave my children away and my wife away over there in India and work here. So I'm going back. No, I'm not going to take this job. And so the year later, it was their 25th wedding anniversary, and he brought us all to the United States, the land of opportunity. And we stopped in the UK on the way. And when we came here, we all loved it a lot. So I converted to an F1 student visa. My mom went back to school, although she's a master's in nutrition.
Yep.
She went back to school so we could have a legal status in the country,
Yep.
still continue to live here. And that is why I have this allegiance towards the United States of America, not, not because of anything else, but this is the country that is truly the land of opportunity. And it treats everyone who walks in with respect and an embrace of love. So if you really are not shy of working hard and you're going to give it your best, I promise you'll make something of yourself in life. And when you reflect back now, 25 years later or whatever it is, it just seems like an American dream where we came in and worked hard and went to school and maintained our legal status in the country.
Which isn't
But
easy. It's a lot of work.
it is a lot
It's
of work. It took
mhm.
20 years for my mother to get her citizenship.
Yep.
It's the most prideful moment of our life.
I bet.
And for my dad to get his citizenship, it took a little less because I could sponsor him. But you know what? It's a journey that you savor because you realize that every little ounce of that journey has given you something. And
Yeah.
I think when we're born, whether we're born into a country or a religion, uh, we tend to just, it's just another Tuesday, we just take it for what it's worth.
Yep.
But when you acquire something by your perseverance and your hard work and your aspiration, then it's just so much more sweeter. And
Yeah.
to me, the blessing of being a citizen of the United States of America and now serving in the capacity of helping the federal government, what my parents and my grandparents did in India, I have just brought it here to the United States and I'm giving it back tenfold. So it's so much more sweeter as a victory.
I love that you share that too, because I think a lot of people do take it for granted. I think a lot of people say things that they would never say if they had been through your experience, right? Coming here and earning that. They see things through a certain frame. And if you just put them in another frame, if you took their citizenship away for a day and sent them to certain parts of the world, they would be, oh my Lord, begging to get back, right? It's really good to hear that people still feel that way and then can get there, because I think that it's an interesting time in that space. So we go from Microsoft to Dell, and you move into that federal space. What were some of the things that were happening at that time that were like the big deals or solutions that were kind of your first intro? Because I want to talk a little bit about, you have a lot of relationships, you have a lot of success in this space over the years, and have done a lot of great things. But I'd be interested to hear like where did you start in the federal? Because that's many companies, businesses, people will go into this and they'll go, all right, how do I tackle this market and become a valuable part of it and build relationships? It's not easy to do. So how did that start?
I will elaborate, but before I go any further, I think the answer is very simple. Be genuine in your intent.
Yeah.
Because people see through fluff.
Yep.
And how did it start? It started because my role at Dell, right from the get-go, was within the consultative services arena at Dell. And as passionate as Mr. Michael Dell is about everything he does in life, and I think I have a lot of respect for that man, for the virtues he has. Actually, I would say every company that I've worked at, I have admiration for some of those leaders. Satya Nadella, I have immense respect for the man. He has changed the optics of how people look at Microsoft. Same thing for Mr. Michael Dell, who his name sits on everything we touch. So he does take it personally. And
think about how that business has evolved too. Like, I don't want to get too deep into it, but you're so right about Dell. Like, at any point in time in history, they've kind of always been consistently good, smart, making the right moves. Like, they're one of the few companies out there at this level that you can't go, oh, look at these terrible mistakes they made at different points. Like, he's done a great job with that enterprise.
Well intended. Again, the genuinity flows through. And no matter if you're a small company born yesterday called 11th Dimension Services, or you are Dell Technologies, if you have genuine intent coming right from the top, from the leader, it doesn't matter what's in between, right? Those seams. But when the intent is right from here, it will trickle down. It will flow through. It may not pull as empoweringly as it should, right, from me, right, or from him, but that it'll flow through. People will see it. And so that's what you're talking about. And so when I joined Dell, it was very nice because I had the opportunity to bring the creative side of me. I say that my two strengths in life are creativity, finding creativity out of ambiguity. And so that is what Dell allowed me to do. And because I knew why Michael Dell had set up that organization is because he wanted to be more than a vendor to his customers. When he acquired EMC and he acquired the array of companies, VMware and everything that came with it, he did, have a company interview the top 100 CIOs that we were selling to. And over 80% of them said, well, we really like Dell as a brand. We want to see them more strategically partnering with us in our strategic journeys, in our transformative journeys. So that's what my role was, is to truly, no pun intended, think outside of the box. And so that's really what I did. And that was my forte. And because of that journey, I started in the Dallas market. And then very quickly, I was given some of the Fortune 5 accounts like Walmart's and Exxon's, and had the privilege of working with very many companies when Ford and GM went through their crisis. But what an array of experience, right? Of having to bring something that uniquely defines what a customer's needs are and addressing them than what's in my bag to sell tomorrow or today. So that journey kind of uniquely defined my brand within Dell, because I always say that it doesn't matter who we work for, we are our own brand first. So even at 11th Dimension, I am my brand first, and then my brand fuels what 11th Dimension looks like. It's not the other way around. So you can't dress me in Gucci and say I'm Gucci. No, I'm not. I am who I am, right? So I think when people started to see what kind of success was evolving in that Fortune 50, it was very natural for some of the leaders to say, you know what, we need this in federal. We're selling a lot, but we're not selling strategically. So I asked to watch that business for the first 90 days. And I went into the business very intentionally and interviewed maybe 98 people. I had one-on-ones, 98 one-on-ones in the first 60 days. So I talked to everybody about how many cattle and kids they had, where they lived, because it was the era of, COVID. So we were behind screens. And I wanted to make sure I could personally connect myself with people, because they are the greatest asset for an organization. If I don't understand where they are, how do I meet them in the journey for transformation? So my goal was to understand where I wanted to be. And I wanted to be part of the federal civilian market so that I could provide a more intimate touch point to the government. And then our government employees, leaders, are so embracing of somebody who comes in new that I was received with open arms. I would be on fireside chats. I would be in, this meeting and that meeting. Just wonderful people, one after another, came into my life and are continuing. They're still in my life, and relationships are something you savor forever. So that allowed me to give this other perspective of, Dell does a magnificent job of selling and meeting the needs of what the customers need in terms of their hardware needs. But what else do they need to make that mission successful? What are those missing pieces? Where are the dents or the creases along the way that we can mend as we are trying to provide them with what we think they're asking for? And sometimes you're the answer for it. And sometimes you just pull in other vendors along the way, which honestly, I think when I want to communicate a point here, when we work with these large companies, CDWG, Dell, Microsoft, listen, we all have great solutions, but by ourselves, we're very incomplete. Because nobody is complete all in themselves. And these missions are so much bigger than us. So it's very important for us to take the onus of responsibility on ourselves. And as a leader, always step back. As a collaborator, always step back and think, what does the mission need? And pull in those other forces with you so that you're simplifying their already complex job for them. So if I had to summarize this, I'd say that's all I did. I started to pull in the forces behind to make sure that every solution was comprehensive and complete. It wasn't just hardware solution. It was a comprehensive transformative solution, and we were taking responsibility for it and not just telling the mission or the agency to take responsibility for bringing all the partners together.
Yeah. One, as much like, I think that's one of the things that I've been most impressed working with you. And we've worked for folks who are listening, we've worked on quite a few things. And I think we both have the mindset of you're only as good as your relationships and your partners. And you have to water those, right? So you meet somebody and you see what they do and you see how you can work together, and you got to follow up on it. There's plenty of people you meet who you make that connection, and then if you don't bring something to them, they don't bring something back. And And you can build that relationship though if two people are looking to do it, and what you can do together is just unbelievable. Something I wanted to ask you about that too. So I think you've said to me before, one of the missions or the goals of your company is to bring together those big vendors, whether it be Dell or VMware or AWS and all these companies, and then partners like my company, CDW, right? Large value-add resellers, MSPs, integrators, and then bring your company and other partners and other groups and bring all that together to do that holistic solution. So you've been at it for a year now. How have you found like a strong reception to that mission?
Really good question. Can I say something before we go there? Because this is a compliment well overdue. So when I started the company, and I thought every company takes at least 2 years to surface above the water and people to realize you exist.
If they make it past a year. Remember, like something like 90% of all companies fail in the first year too. So if you make it a year, you might surface.
You're very true, right? But again, we can never undermine the strength of relationships and people, because survival is not in my brain and intellect as a CEO. Survival is in my relationships and my collaborators who want to see us take the next breath. And top of the chart there is CDWG. And it's because of people like yourself, Corey, and other members of the team that found value in our brand, even when the brand was young, because you found value in the relationship and our alliances that we've had in the past, and you could see it developing. You gave it the time to show its magic. And I would say kudos to that. So very thankful for this collaboration and partnership and this embrace from you guys as we were just starting to walk our first steps and crawl and walk. So same thing goes for a lot of companies, and I would this call would go for a long time if I had to name every one of them. But I will say this: we're a very young company, but a lot of brands have people. I say brands, I mean leaders in those organizations invested a buck in believing in us, right? They thought there's something that they do that I want to add to my portfolio. It could be a varied amount of things. There's certain consulting firms, very large, that engaged us early on because they thought, you know what, you guys do governance really well. We haven't seen somebody do it this way. My goal was always, as a leader, to bring in the most highly experienced and well-established people in every sphere of services that we offered. And the rest of it was the magic of collaboration. But because we are a young company, I say that if we walked 5 steps, people also walked 3 or 5 or 10 steps towards us. They were open to the idea of allowing us to collaborate. I would go as far as to say we're a young company, but even federal government, SLED, private sector, which we didn't think we were going to cater to the private sector early on. I thought we were just going to focus on federal and SLED. But, everybody started to come in and there was an outpour of love and people just saying, okay, we know we've worked with you over here before. You've done this in the past. One of the very large companies I worked with in my career before, one of the procurement people from that team had left and gone to another procurement, a very large healthcare company this time. And he called me and he said, I'm so proud of you. You started your own company. You did, amazing work over there. And we need help over here. Can I introduce you to my IT leadership so you can start to collaborate with us? So I would say collaboration is a two-way street. And especially when you're born young, unknown as an entity, you can be easily lost in the world. But it is because of these amazing relationships and the belief in the strength of partnering and giving somebody as young as us a chance that we have been, we've had a very rewarding year, that first year of our life.
Yeah. Well, and there's a couple of things about young companies that are very valuable to bigger companies, which is the agility, right? Like you can call the CEO and she can grab her team and she can tell you she's going to do it. And when she says she's going to do it, she's going to do it because she wants to build that bridge, right? And it goes both ways. Like we open the door to things that we're doing and you kill it. And then we're like, hey, and the next thing you know, it goes both ways. And one other, I think, key thing there is it goes back to those relationships. People buy from who they like, they buy from who they trust, and they buy from who has treated them well in the past. And it's hilarious that you have an ex-procurement person, because I've had the same thing. And I've had others where you run into someone who worked on a team, you sold something years ago, and you run into them accidentally. And they're like, oh, I remember you. You sold us our XYZ, and that's that project. And I do want to, I know we're getting close to the hour and I don't want to keep you too late, but I did want to like go over some of the things you all do for my CEW counterparts, competitors, whoever ends up watching this that might be interested in what you all do. Rather than me kind of going through it, why don't you tell me some of the areas? You mentioned one, obviously governance. Can you tell us anything about your approach to governance? What makes your company unique in that?
Yes, I can talk a little bit about governance. I'll come back to that. Let me start by kind of sharing our portfolio a little bit more. So there was a very intentional effort to create a go-to-market that would kind of fill in some of the unattractive deficits along the way that I had noticed over these years. We all love, I say, but, when you work in technology, people love buzzwords. The greatest one these days is Gen AI.
Yeah.
A few years ago or a couple years ago, it was blockchain and 5G, and we just graduate. We like the next car in our garage, right?
Yep.
So I come from a slightly different school of thought. I like to see there's always a journey behind a destination, and the journey is always more sweeter to me than the destination is, because the destination is an effort to do this, right? I'm trying to catch something. The journey is perseverance, effort, and learning, because the journey teaches you what to do, but more importantly, what not to do and how to fix some of the dents along the way. So when we established our go-to-market, it was an effort to make sure that we're catering to the mission outcomes, but we're fixing a few things along the way. So I like to say we're the janitorial services of technology. And I take pride in that, because somebody has to do that. And that is why we were never a threat to any of the consulting firms, any of the partners, big, small, large, medium, whatever the size they were. They were never threatened by our existence, because our goal was not the next 5, 10, $50 million contract. Our goal was to find relevance and add value along the way. So we picked 3 key areas, very much aligned to the federal mandates and very much aligned to what the private sector does. Believe it or not, the federal sector looks at private sector thinking they're leading, but I generally say we're leading in federal. And the private sector is just doing it a little bit faster because they're able to do it that way. Okay. So
one thing with federal is, and people who might not know this, usually whatever's leading in public sector was done somewhere in federal long before that. Like we look at things like AI, and I'm not talking the new fun Gen AI, but like analytics and general, like the AI that is really interesting, the large models and stuff. Like government's been doing that a long time, like since like the Manhattan Project, thinking about computers at that level, and so they may think they lead, and that's why things like OTAs exist, right? Where they can go out and get a non-traditional federal contractor to get something from the public sector or the private sector. But yeah, you're absolutely right in a lot of ways.
Yes. So yes, you're absolutely right. LLM was first utilized in the federal sector and is
Yep.
still utilized,
Yep.
but it's not common public knowledge, right? It's
Yeah.
not something. The other thing is federal doesn't brag about things they do. It's the nature of the beast.
Yep.
So people don't get to hear about it. It's not on the news line to admire that, you know. But anyway, going back to our go-to market, so we paid very a very good amount of attention on data and data-driven outcomes. And we decided, you know what? For the past 3 decades, what has the world done? They've created data. Every time you saw something in the news, you saw an article, you saw a research paper, people talked about the multiplication of data. It's going to go to, whatever the bytes, right? So much data and so much data and so much data. When exactly did we start hearing about security?
Yeah, exactly.
When it became
Uh,
a problem, right?
yeah, always. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or still, we don't hear about it enough. Yeah.
But
No,
so,
we,
because we are always doing this to get to the shiny object, we
hmm
generally forget some of the important things along the way. And so
Well,
security became a big topic, or cybersecurity became a big topic when it became a big problem. So what we decided is our practice is going to be called data and data security
yep.
because one doesn't go without the other.
Yep.
So, what we do for a lot of our customers and partners is we offer foundational security services for data. And people love that, right? Whether that is the missions or whether that is our private sector customers or whether that is our SLED customers. We're working with
Yep.
you guys on so many of those opportunities
Yep.
because it's less attractive for large companies to pivot. Being nimble, we can do that. It's
Yeah.
easier for me to be that nimble and say, okay, there is a gap. It's in data foundations services as it pertains to security. Because all these years, the world used to look at resiliency in the light of disaster recovery,
Yep.
right? That was resilience. Today, resilience starts with cybersecurity, zero trust, multi-factor authentication. How do you kind of bring everything together?
Yep.
ATP. But a very important part of it is recovery. Every single person, individually and institution, will be hit. We're
Yep.
going to be attacked. It's the nature of the world we live in.
Yep.
Do you know what are the crown jewels in your home? Because if you have a safe deposit box at home, but if you don't know what is really precious, what are the crown jewels of your life that you need to pick and run with when something disastrous happens, then that safe deposit box is no good for you because you don't know what to
Correct.
put in there.
Well, and
So
people don't, even if you have a safe deposit box, do you use it and do you build the foundational? I kept thinking about like what you're talking about. I deal with it with my son all the time. It's like, I know you want to jump up and dunk the basketball, but like first you got to learn how to dribble, right? It's the foundation and what do they call it? The fundamentals. It's getting
fundamental.
that fundamentals right so that it scales. And with security, it's putting those things in place so that you actually execute them so you are protected when you get to scale.
Exactly.
Sorry.
No, no, no. That's a really good input. And then you talked about governance. What does governance mean to us? Governance means so many different things, but unfortunately, it's an afterthought a lot of time for organizations, both public and private sector, I would say. And it's not an intentional, let me put this on the side. It
Mhm.
is unfortunately one of those things that's an afterthought by accident.
Yep.
Uh, it's an afterthought when it becomes a real problem, when
Yeah.
adoption is happening, then people start thinking about governance. So we like to think about governance on the front end of it because anything that you're doing, you want to make sure that it's easier to adopt that. It is easier for your organizational processes and your charter to adhere to whatever you're trying to do. And when you're dealing with data, if you don't have governance, then you're either oversimplifying what you're doing or overcomplicating what you're doing, but you're not meeting your users. Your user experience is not going to be anything because it's not truly governed. So think about an agency that has a lot of sub-agencies under them, right? If they are putting something into practicality, into practice and standardizing something, but they're really not governing it, right? Then how do they make that simplified for the other sub-agencies to adopt, for their users to adopt? And that's where a complete solution becomes missing, because we like to focus on people, process, and then technology. That's where optimization comes in. That's where you get rid of redundancy. That's where you make room to bring in more. If I have the 5 last couches in my house that I've had for the last 50 years, then where is the room to bring another one, right? So making room, yes, the government does get a budget every year, but you know what? Let's make some space. Let's make some space, right? So I think governance in that is an attribute that people need to start thinking ahead of time, especially now as we're going more and more into the world of AI and ML, and now with Gen AI. Think about Gen AI without governance. What is it? Think about Gen AI without authority. What is it?
That is such a good. So I was at the Texas Digital Government Summit last month, and they did a panel with Google's head of AI, and this deputy CIO of Department of Human Services for Texas, and a gentleman from Dell. And one of the biggest things that we stressed was like, hey, everyone's wondering kind of how to use it, how to use it. It's like, hey, maybe start with putting out a statement to your team on governance and set in place some goals and some guidelines around it. Because here's the thing. If an authorized user can get in, an unauthorized user can get in. So there's always going to be risk, right? And so you have to have security and you have to have governance, but it also has to be convenient to the point where your users will do it and not go around you. Because I've seen a lot of places they try to ban generative AI, for example, or you see the schools that are very worried about cheating. And it's like, listen, there was people out protesting the calculator when the calculator came out. You don't want to be on that side of history. You need to look at this at what it is. It's another tool, and it's something that has risks and benefits. So start to build a governance around it. How should your organization leverage tools like AI? How can they do it securely? How can they do it through a program that's ran by your security team and your infrastructure team? Because otherwise, we're already seeing this in our industry, and you know this as well. It's the IT and the users are kind of becoming one, and the people in the middle, they do everything now. It's not here's your security team and here's your storage team and here's your server team. It's here's my IT and security and cloud and everything.
The towers are gone, right?
Yep.
There's no towers anymore because we've left no room for them, and there shouldn't be any room for them because we cannot act in a more nimble and agile way if we have those towers. Those are blockers. So generative
100%.
AI is definitely an asset when governed and used in the right way. We have a couple of use cases we're currently implementing for customers, but intentionally, they're baby steps. We want them to start a use case that is more with their public-facing data than with their non-public facing data. So if there is any glitches in the initial run, they will feel them out and govern them a little bit better for their non-public facing data. So our goal is always to make sure that it's not that we shouldn't try new things. I'm usually the person that goes and buys the Apple iPhone when it's new because I want to try it, right? But there's nothing wrong in it. But then make sure you don't try it in a way that you're exposing yourself to vulnerabilities more than you need to. So that's one practice area for us. The other two are quite simple. The second practice area is anything to do with IT and digital transformation. So all of your application, cloud adoption, multi-cloud selection, platform selection, Financial optimization is something we like to put front and center, because anytime you're doing anything with your existing footprint or your new footprint that you're establishing, make sure you build that in there so there's no unforeseen surprises or startles for you along the way. So we like to do it the right way and kind of build that layer of governance in there as well. And then finally, we take a lot of pride in this one practice area, which is also very important to the federal government. It's called culture change and operational excellence. So how does every IT team, public and private sector, become a services provider to their components, to their business? And it's really important that we as technologists and as collaborators enable our IT teams to become service providers, because that's when we will truly shift from the era where IT was keeping the lights on and towers and this and that, to IT truly becoming a solution enabler, a solution provider. And so we take a lot of pride in that practice because it kind of brings everything together for us, because in that practice, we have human change management, we have user experience, we have citizen experience. We like to emphasize on any platform that we're very platform agnostic, both from a cloud standpoint as well as from an integration standpoint. So whether you are ServiceNow users or BMC users or Microsoft users, it doesn't matter, because everybody has their personalized needs and we like to make sure that we meet them where they are. And the way we do this is generally by something that we call journey roadmaps. We like to make sure that when we start working with any of our customers, in fact, with you guys too, we sometimes come in on the front end and we're establishing a journey roadmap just to make sure that the customer is not by accident, wearing blinders and missing out on one of the important components, whether that is applications, infrastructure, governance, security, people, processes, anything that quite matters to how their adoption and their transformation will look on the other side. So that's kind of what 11th Dimension Services offers, Corey, and we're very, very, excited about the journey ahead of us.
Yeah. So thank you. I mean, and we're coming up on time, but I do want to end with something that I'm trying out for the first time this time. So the last couple of years have been an interesting one, becoming a dad for me and getting really focused on health. I had a crazy migraine thing a couple of years ago, and that led me to a lot more weightlifting and a lot more sauna and getting out and riding the bike with my son and stuff and trying to stay ahead of it. So for someone who works a lot, and I know you work a lot because often I call you at 7 and you're still working, and I also talk to you at 8 in the morning and before you're still working, and so I know you're busy. How do you go about relaxing and taking care of yourself outside of work?
To me is more important than anything else, because if you're not happy with yourself, you cannot keep others happy. If you're not radiant, there is no light within you, then you can't spread light, right? So it's just as simple as that. I told you I did do everything, every piece of your education. We started there, never goes wasted. And I did psychology and nutrition and in my undergrad. So I not ever let that go out of me. That's my passion alongside what I do for work. And so I'm an early riser. I wake up around 4 every morning. If I don't wake up at that time, my family generally knows not to get in my way because I'm not going to be a happy person. Because I did not give my me time to myself, right?
Yeah.
So as soon as I wake up, I will show up being the absolute bee that I am, the butterfly, and I show up at the gym somewhere because I like people and I like to work out around people. So it's either yoga, I practice hot yoga, the Bikram yoga, or it is Orange Theory. I show up at either one of those studios, put my hour in there, and it gives me emotional sanctity, mental sanctity, and physical strength to deal with the rest of the day. And I'm not, if I don't work out in the morning, and this is also on the weekends, by the way, I work out in the morning, because if I don't work out in the morning, by this time, my energy pendulum is like swaying to the other side. I'm done. I want to eat. I want to be around family. I want to do something, but I don't want to do anything physical. So yes, I think physical fitness is extremely important because it gives us mental sanity and emotional strength. And if any of the audiences today don't gather anything out of this discussion, I would say take one line from me: make yourself happy. Because when you're happy, you will glow from within, and you won't have to try. The right light from within will radiate. We live in the world that is made of energy, and it is energy that flows from one person to another. So bring yourself some goodness and give yourself some grace.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Arveen, thank you so much for being a guest. I'd love to have you back in the future and talk more. And looking forward to all the other great business and stuff we're going to do. Thanks so much for joining.
It is my pleasure, Corey. Thank you for having me.